Welcome to Amplify, the personal brand entrepreneur show. Today on the show, Bob is speaking with Jenny Ainsworth.
So my phrase, and people hate it, I've got to be honest, is do something or do nothing, but be absolutely acutely aware that both of those are choices. If you choose to do nothing, that is absolutely your choice to do so. But please, I can't have another conversation with you about how your life is and how things are feeling if nothing whatsoever has changed. I can't do anything with that. You know, we're better off trying to do something and just seeing how it felt.
Hi there and welcome back to the Personal Brand Business Show. My name is Bob Gentle and every week I speak with incredible people who share their secrets to building, marketing and monetizing your expertise, intentionally growing a unique personal brand and the mindset you need for your business to grow and thrive. If you're new to the show, then while you still have your device on your hand, hit the subscribe button and that way you won't miss a single episode. And if you are a regular listener, then consider sharing this show with just one person. It's the very best way you can help the show grow and help me reach more people. And if you're watching on YouTube, hi, welcome. And while you're here, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and give the show a like. I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers. It's going to be a long road, Jenny, but I'm in it for the long haul. So some people are naturally athletic. They make awesome athletes, but that doesn't mean all athletes are naturally athletic. The same goes for motivation. Some people are naturally motivated, the rest of us need to work at it. And as the saying goes, hard work beats talent where talent doesn't work. So this week, we are blessed to be joined by my personal motivation maven, my Dr. Strange of the positive mindset, the one and only Jenny Ainsworth. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob. What an intro. I love it. I might have that on my gravestone.
Well, I think you can, maybe not your gravestone, maybe your LinkedIn bio. So Jenny, we've known each other for a couple of years, and I'm not kidding, but you have been, for me, a really powerful role model and a huge motivating factor in my own business. But for the listener or the viewer who is meeting you for the first time, can you just give us a potted introduction to the life and work of Jenny Ainsworth so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So my last corporate position, I worked for Disney. I was a European training manager for Disney. And I was acutely aware of the people that we were buying in, entrepreneurs, if you will. And they were coming in and running courses and sessions and speaking at conferences. And it got to the stage where, quite frankly, and I wouldn't say I'm an arrogant person, but I looked at many of these people and thought, I could do that. And I could do that so much better than you. You know, you are speaking to a big global audience and you're not as connected, you're not as relational as you potentially could be. So I took the leap and I left. And it's since then, I've worked all over the world and primarily I deal with leadership and mindset and motivation. So it's about helping leaders, particularly in corporate, get the best out of themselves, get the best out of others, particularly in this hybrid working way when, you know, you've got teams who are scattered about all over the globe. You're not seeing each other every day. So it's how do you really connect at a deep level with people so they feel seen, they feel valued, they feel that they can contribute at their best. And that's essentially what I help people with.
So for me, in terms of motivation, we'll start with motivation. I think motivation and positive mindset, they're closely bound together.
Yeah.
But like I said in the intro, some people are naturally highly motivated and others are not necessarily lacking talent, but they are possibly not naturally motivated people. So on the one hand, there's the question of leadership. How do you motivate people as a leader? But then the other side of it for me is if you don't have a boss, like people like you and I, we have to do it ourselves. There's nobody waking us up in the morning saying, go Bob, go Jenny. It's down to you and I. And I think it was Zig Ziglar said, motivation is a little bit like having a shower. It's something you should do every day. It isn't something that just happens to you. So I guess from a self-motivation perspective, if you want to get fit, you go to the gym. People kind of know how what you do in the gym.
Yeah.
From a personal mindset, from a motivation perspective, what's the equivalent to that?
The equivalent is noticing where your attention is. And so again, you know, going to the gym, I'm going to now speak as if I know what I'm talking about. Apparently you have things like a leg day, Bob. So that's where the attention is going. Focus on a leg, you know, to get the strength of your legs. Other times it might be, you know, upper body, whatever. But where your attention goes, that's where energy flows, and that's where you're focusing to make that better. I think with motivation, you have to notice where your attention is. Are you looking at everything that could go wrong? Are you looking at that? I don't think that's quite ready yet. I don't think they're going to like me. There's other people doing things the same as me, but perhaps better. All of that attention, what you focus your attention on grows. And so you see more of it. And therefore, if you are noticing everything that's wrong, everything that's not quite right, other people who are doing things similarly to you but better, then that's not going to leave you in a great state. Now, I have to say, are there other people out there who are doing things well? Yes. And could your thing be, tweaked ever so slightly again? Yes, it could. But that's not the right question. The question is, what needs to happen for me to nudge myself forward, just an inch today? What needs to happen? And it's very much around, so what am I going to focus on that's going to bring me that momentum and nudging forward rather than feeling stuck because you're looking at everything that's not working in your favor?
I think that is an extremely powerful insight, that energy flows where attention goes. One of the things that people talk about a lot at the moment is journaling. I think there is a danger when people enter into things like journaling that they just look at the problems through the day.
Yes.
I think this is one of the reasons why people quite often get told you need to focus on things like gratitude. What are 3 things you're grateful for today?
Yeah.
In order to try and bring in the positive.
Yeah.
But what's in my head here, I remember I used to really struggle with my personal visibility. I was so anxious about it, insecure, everything that you can imagine. I'm a very naturally shy person. And I was speaking to Ian Anderson Gray, who I think you probably know.
Yeah.
And he gave me this practice, which I found very powerful. To keep a small journal, don't have to add to it very often, but whenever anybody says anything positive about you, capture it.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary how quickly that builds up and how quickly your self-image changes. And I think this is why this practice of noticing, it's difficult to overemphasize the power of this.
Yeah.
Because as a species, there is no survival benefit to noticing the positive.
No.
There's none. As cavemen, it didn't help you at all to notice when you were doing things well. There was only a benefit if it didn't kill you. If it didn't kill you, well done.
In terms of that and writing, and I think that's such a powerful practice, is to write down, yes, the feedback. I've got things like a particular folder on my emails where I've had some positive feedback, to put things in there. Because here's the thing, very often when you are given a compliment, you are given a compliment by somebody who does not have that particular strength or talent in the same way that you have. And so they notice it in you. And because you have got that strength and talent, very often it comes quite easily to you. And if something comes easily to us, we dismiss it. We don't consider it weighty or valuable. What we do is notice the stuff that we haven't got, and we put weight there. We put weight on, I'm not good at X, and it feels weighty. So when people say, oh, you know what, Bob, you're great at X. Do you know what, Jenny? I love the way that you do Y. Our initial instinct is to rebuff it and to push it back, because it's not something perhaps that we've given much thought about, because we're quite good at it. And I think we really need to change our mindset around recognizing, even if something doesn't come, even if something hasn't been strived for, if it's been relatively easily achieved, then that value and that achievement is no lesser than something that's come with blood, sweat and tears. We really need to recognize the things that we do well, because we tend to diminish their worth. And that's something that's not good, not healthy for motivation.
I think that's an important point. I mean, comparison is quite a natural thing for us to do as human beings. We'll compare, but we only compare with what we don't have.
Yes.
We'll never compare with the people that where we have strengths that they're perhaps lacking. That's actually a really powerful insight. So when it comes to going back to the gym, the leg day, we're maybe moving on to an arm day. Are there any other practices, as somebody that's sort of looking at this from it's your job to help motivate people and help people to motivate their own people? Yeah. What else is in the toolbox, so to speak?
Yeah, I think for me, it's all around, what needs to happen to nudge this forward, and what can I do? Because there's many things. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a positive person. I call myself an optimist, and an optimist is much more around it will be all right, and everything. At this stage, right now, I might not know how, but I believe if I do the next right thing, ultimately all of those things will join up and it will be all right. So what is the next right thing? And sometimes, there's a whole thing about, you have to see the whole staircase. No, you don't. You need to see the next step. Get onto that step and think, right, now what? Now, so let me give you an example. It might be something like the next right thing is to phone somebody, is to phone a client, is to phone a contact. That might be the next right thing to do. And then that nudges it on a little bit rather than, but what if they don't answer? What if when they do answer, this happens? What? It's like, okay, we will cross that bridge when we come to it. But actually, the right thing for me to do now is to make contact with 2 or 3 clients, and that is what I'm going to do today. So it is very much around, we talk about goals and things like that, but bite size is the key. And there's a website called the Progress Principle. Teresa Amabile, she's a Harvard business professor, and she gave out journals to, I think it was something like 12,000 different people. And she said, at the end of every day, I want you to write down, how do you feel about your working day today, and what do you attribute that to? 144,000 diary entries later, over 70% of people who said, I've had a good day, put it down to a sense of progress. So we talk very much around we need to celebrate success. But for me, if we're going to talk about that's the equivalent of, people who do a marathon ultimately say, even if they've done, 1 marathon or 10, they hit a wall. They get to a stage because it's a long drawn out, it's not a sprint, it is a marathon. It's a long drawn out thing. There's so much that has to come into play, and mindset being a big one. And at some point, whether it's mile 10, whether it's mile 20, they will hit that wall and think, I can't go on. And inevitably, it's the crowd that gets them through, that says, look how far you've come, this is fantastic, which comes down to a little bit in our world, the reflecting back on the journal that you described, looking back at the feedback and saying, this is how far I've come, this is what I do. If everybody waited, if all the crowd waited at mile 26, yes, you're pleased and delighted that you've crossed the line. You've crossed the line.
Finish line, yeah.
But ultimately, where you needed the insight, the support, the oomph, might have been at mile 10, 12, 16. So I'm not one that says we need to celebrate success more. I think we need to celebrate progress more, and in particular, our own progress, and looking, what am I doing today that I wasn't doing 3 months ago? What's happening today that wasn't happening in the first quarter of the year? Because it happens so quickly, and, we don't realise where the year goes. But sometimes when we reflect back, we think, I am actually further forward than I gave myself credit for. And it's the age-old thing, again, to use the marathon perspective. We might think, I'm only on mile 10, there's another 16 to go. And very often as entrepreneurs, we very much focus on there's still 16 miles to go, rather than, good grief, I've done 10 miles and I've done 10 miles really well. So it really is about honouring ourselves and celebrating the progress that we've made, which I think has a huge impact on motivation.
Want to hear a funny marathon story?
Yes.
I ran a marathon.
Oh.
And for me, I didn't have a wall, but it was like I ran into a marshmallow. I got to something like mile 18, and then, I don't know if you ever have these dreams, but you're running and you just can't move.
Yeah.
It was a little bit like that. And I think a lot of business owners probably feel a bit like that as well, that they've been working, and nothing ever seems to move. And Jenny, I think this is going to be the first show of 2023, and I think it's the perfect place to start for everybody. How do you move into a new year? I mean, you've had a difficult couple of years, if I'm honest. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, but how do you move from the last couple of years that you've had into planning a year that's going to make you excited?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love January. I really do. I love that whole sense of brand new calendar, brand new year. I love it. January and September are my favourite months of the year, because September you have that sort of back to school feeling and the last sort of third of the year. And January you've got the whole year ahead of you. Yeah, I have had a challenging year. I've had breast cancer this year, so I've had a lot of treatment, a lot of time out of work. So it's not been the ideal year. But always when it comes to Christmas time and that period in between Christmas and New Year, when you don't know if it's Tuesday, Wednesday or whatever, I always like to think, how do I feel now? How do I feel in myself? How do I feel about my business? You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much in love am I with my business? On a scale of 1 to 10, how pleased am I with the progress I've made in my business? And if it stayed at this same level this time next year, Christmas next year, how would that make me feel? And so I get a sense of what's working, what isn't, you know. And then I like to think, okay, so what am I taking with me into this new year? And that might be practices that you've started, might be practices that are years old that have served you well, but it's what's the stuff that's working that I need to continue doing? And then is what's the stuff that I need to leave behind? And it might have been stuff that served you well. And I think this is a big thing for entrepreneurs. We find something and we get into a groove of something that works, but then we're reluctant, we're fearful about stopping doing it, even though deep down we recognise it's not serving us in the same way as it perhaps might have done. And I think it's about being brave and saying, you did serve me well, that was a good thing to do, but it's not helping me move forward now for the time and effort that I'm putting into it. It's not helpful. So thank you for the season that it worked, or seasons. Now I'm leaving you behind. And then I think it's not a spring clean, but it's the start of the year clean, like in terms of what am I taking with me that works? What do I need to change? And I like to break the year up into sort of 90 days, quarter. So where do I want to be by end of March? Where do I want to be then? End of wherever. Oops. And it's just, I think that's helpful. A month is too quick for me. It just flies by and I don't get things embedded. To do things over 6 months is just, it loses that sense. To go back to the marathon, you hit a little bit of the wall or the marshmallow legs. So for me, 90 days, 3 months is a good sense of what do I want to achieve in that time and how am I going to do it?
I agree with you. I think the 90 days, for me, that is a golden window. It's short enough that you can have that sense of achievement when you get to the end of it, but it's also long enough that you can get a proper run at things.
Yes.
And when you have 4 of those sprints a year, it can make a massive difference to the year. I think I see a lot of people who move through the year as though it were a year, and it's just too much to take on, really.
Yeah.
A lot of people will plan a grand vision, but if you don't hit it at the end of the year, you're going to be very, very disappointed.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got 4 of those sprints a year, you've got far more opportunity to recover. The wins might be slightly smaller, but they compound quite differently.
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful approach. So you and I are a similar age.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to the, what do I call this? Second half of Life Will Be Generous.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, if they haven't achieved what they set out to achieve as a 20-something or a 30-something, they can often fall in the trap of thinking it's too late. This is something that I see more and more often, that people think that they can't achieve massive changes later in life.
Yeah.
And we know that that's not true. I guess when you're working in the corporate space, the people who are in leadership roles, they've often proven themselves. Mm-hmm. But when you're working with solopreneur, small business owners, that's far less often the case.
Yeah.
What would you say to anybody who's, it doesn't actually matter what age they're at, but they've begun to resign themselves to, well, this is what I got now. This is all I'm going to ever have.
Yeah.
How do you move them out of something like that and reinvigorate that sense of adventure and the potential, the enthusiasm for their own potential they may have had earlier on in life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, there's a big thing in terms of it can happen. There's no two ways about it. It can. And I think recognizing that it happens. I think the first thing to do is I get challenged by people who say, oh, don't worry about it, because quite clearly people are. So it's just not a helpful phrase, and I know people are trying to say it to be kind, but it's not helpful. So the first thing I think is important to do is acknowledge it, acknowledge that it feels tough, rather than you shouldn't feel like this, you do. So that's the starting point. But, when we were kids, somebody who was 50 or 40, 50, 60, it literally was one foot in the grave. It literally, they were old. I'm 51 or 52 next. I could potentially live another 40 years. I literally am halfway through my life. And what I've sort of said to people is, I recognise it can feel difficult starting again, at this stage, because you're having to take off everything that brought you to now and to start from a brand new place. And that can be really challenging. But the question is, again, a little bit back to how I reflect at Christmas, it's how does this make you feel now? And it's demoralised, it's down. Okay, so you could potentially live another 40 years. Are you saying that you are happy to be in this state for the next 40 years? And they always say, of course not. But what I'm saying is, I said, no, let's just and of course not, full stop. So what needs to happen for me to feel a bit better? And there's a big thing, I have to say, about people in midlife. They have been the experts. They have been the people who've been leading the way. And a huge thing is very much around acknowledging there may be somebody who's 20, 30 years younger than you who's got all the answers. And that is nothing to be ashamed of. It really isn't. It's about how do I learn from everybody and everything that's out there, whether they're 25 or whether they're 75, whether, it's what's the good stuff that I'm seeing working. They might not have the same worldview as you at age 25, but they may still have some techniques, some tips, some strategies that you think that could work in my context. So I think it's really looking and thinking what fits me, what could work, how can I make this, turn this around, rather than, oh, that's a kid who's 25, he's still at home, doesn't have to worry about a mortgage and all of that. Yeah, okay, that is very different. I've got a mortgage too. So I've got to eat, I've got to pay my bills. So that in and of itself, I use that as a motivation. So what needs to happen this month to nudge it forward? And I think there's something around allowing yourself to be influenced positively by different people than you might automatically be attracted to. Allow that, because that's where the jewels are.
I think that's a really, really useful insight. And I'm gonna bring in another perspective to this, because I think to not acknowledge this at the moment would not be doing justice to people who might be rightly potentially feeling a little bit negative about their businesses at the moment.
Yeah.
I was in a call with 5 or 6 other people a few weeks ago, and there was a lot of negativity around the economy. There's a lot of negativity around the sort of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the West and things like that. And then there's the weather at this time of the year. It's really hard if your business isn't buoyant within all of that to be positive sometimes.
Mm.
When you're working at a corporate level and you're working with an executive that's maybe just negative, how do you snap them out of that? Because I think that how you approach that probably is going to inform how people can perhaps, I'm going to say, slap themselves out of that funk as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. First of all, there's a term in psychology called the locus of control, not locust with a T, locus of control, and it's where you tend to view. And people who have got an external locus of control get very dominated by people, by things, by situations. And I have had conversations with people that have said, well, if Bob had done that, and Jimmy hadn't have done that, and Mary had done that, I would be okay. And you think, okay, that might be true, but you have got no control over Bob, Mary, Bill, whoever else it was. You've only got control over yourself. And if you could sit and get resentful about what is happening or what isn't happening, then nothing is going to happen. So my phrase, and people hate it, I've got to be honest, is do something or do nothing. But be absolutely acutely aware that both of those are choices. If you choose to do nothing,
Yes.
That is absolutely your choice to do so. But please, I can't have another conversation with you about how your life is and how things are feeling if nothing whatsoever has changed. I can't do anything with that. We're better off trying to do something and just seeing how it felt, seeing and looking at the results. If we've got any, if we don't have any, okay, why was that? But that gives us some data to work on. But if you're not prepared to do anything because you're frustrated about what's going on, then I can't help you either. And, people don't like that. I don't like that. Sometimes I look at things and I think, God, I put all this work and I just want it to be different, and I do. And there is a sense of, allowing yourself to sort of lick your wounds a little bit and then think, okay, what needs to happen? So people who have an internal locus of control look at, okay, so what can I do? And those 4 words are very interesting. The negative person, the person who has an external locus of control, puts the emphasis on I. What can I do? And normally we talk about, well, that's all you've got is yourself, but the I is it's negative. It's little old me. How can I do anything? Whereas the person who's got an internal locus of control, which is much more around, well, what can I do? And the emphasis is on the can. It's on the action. And so there's something around taking action, however small, like I said earlier on, that phone call or sending that email, whatever it might be, what can I do that nudges us forward rather than seeing ourselves as small and ineffectual. And if you see yourself as small and ineffectual, there's very little that anybody externally can do to change your mind. Very little.
So I think what I would like to talk about next is actually your work specifically in the corporate sector.
Yeah.
What kind of companies hire you and why? What's the trigger for when they bring someone like you in?
We talk a lot about, building your tribe, and my tribe has been built by people in businesses hiring me and then going to another business. And so I am very lucky in terms of the corporates that I work with. I work with a lot of financial institutions. I work with a lot of banks. I work with a lot of the big tech companies. And, they're quite incestuous. Somebody will go from one bank to another. And then, once they've got themselves established there, they will then get in touch with me and say, I want to bring you in, I'm thinking of doing X. And so, people have bought me. There are a million of me's out there who are doing very similar things, helping leaders. I do a lot of work with women in leadership and women in business as well. There's an awful lot of people out there, but I've used this example before. There are, probably 50 types of shampoo that's out there. There's probably, 10 different types of baked beans. They're still baked beans, it's still shampoo. But people choose and buy what fits them and what they like. And so, some people like me, some people don't. I suspect I'm very Marmite, actually. I either connect with people or I fundamentally do not. I don't think there's much sort of in the middle of, which is all right. But in many ways, that's good because I know the people who want me. And I very much trade on relationship. So much in business is very transactional. Where are you with this? How are you getting on with that? What's happening with the other? Which is fine, and we need that. But for me, it's all about relationships and how are people finding their work, what's going on that's getting in the way of either themselves or their teams. And I think if we can talk at it at a human level, that's where the magic happens. And so I think that's why people end up coming back to me and I end up following people all over the world to their different, respective institutions.
And when people hire you, what does an engagement actually look like? From a practical sense?
Yeah. There's an issue, there's a problem that they want fixing and they can't fix it. So it is either a very specific issue between two people, or it's more around we need some sort of shift culturally towards X. We need to be much more transformational in our leadership. We need to be able to deal better from a hybrid perspective. How do we do that given all the different personalities? How do we help people connect at a deeper, more human level so performance goes up, profitability goes up? So there tends to be a problem. And then I have to go in and find out whether it is that problem or whether it's something else. Often it is the problem. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes I think the problem is actually a symptom of what's going on underneath. And then it's a case of I put together a package of how I could help. So I can either do the helping people within the business and sort of, I guess, train people up to spot things like I do and to help people from a coaching perspective, a leadership perspective. It might be that I do big Zooms now, sort of 300 people a time to kickstart and launch something. And then we do sort of a program where people sort of come back to me once a month and they get a bit of coaching, a bit of input and content, etc. So it really, it's highly dependent on budget always, but outcome. What's the outcome that they're looking for and how quickly do they want that outcome dictates the package and the solution that I draw up for them.
And I am very curious. Discoverability is a huge factor in a personal brand business like yours. People can't hire you if they don't know you're there.
No.
What's your strategy for making sure that the right people know about you? Is it content? Is it relationships?
Yeah,
How do you approach that?
It's definitely relationships. And what I've found is when I do sort of little videos on LinkedIn or, Instagram, things like that, and I mean little videos, sort of a minute and a half, and I always put on 90-second video, which I think is helpful to people. And it's often just amusing. And that is, as in two words, amusing. So some thoughts that have come to mind. And what people have found, I've had really good input on that. And I didn't used to do that. I always felt the need to teach, to show a new model or a new something. But what I found is when I'm sharing my thoughts around what I'm seeing, what I'm observing, people very much are going, yes, that is exactly it. That is exactly what's going on for us. So I've been very much, you talk about the observational comics who reflect back your life. You think, oh, good grief, that is exactly what is going on in our household right now. I tend to see myself as an observational consultant where I reflect back what I'm noticing, the conversations that I'm having. And that has been the real deal breaker for me in terms of people saying, yeah, that's us. Can you come in and help us with that, please? And so that's been a real turning point for me.
I think that's really interesting. And the reason I asked that question is you are well connected. I know who you know.
Yeah.
And it's some big names in what you might call the internet marketing world.
Yeah.
These are big content creators, big authors. And it would be very tempting for you to go and do what's working for other people.
Yeah.
But because of the outcome that you need being different from the outcome they need, you have a very specific Jenny Ainsworth strategy that works.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It would be very easy for you to just go and copy what you see other people doing.
It would, and it's definitely been a temptation. It's definitely been a temptation, but it came back to what can I say that's different? What's my slant on this? And I've got things, but is it enough? And I don't see that as a slur on me at all. I just recognise that my strengths and my talents lie elsewhere. So that's where I think we'll channel them accordingly, channel where you're going to get the best return. And so who's to say what's going to turn up in the future? But at this stage, it's working for me.
So you'd mentioned earlier on, before I started recording, that you have your own little program. That sounds so patronizing when I say little program. I apologize. But it's a non-corporate program. It's for the solopreneurs. Well, you tell me, who is this program for and what's it about?
No, it's not for solopreneurs. This particular program that I've got is actually for women, women in business. I'm starting it corporately because I simply want to get the testimonials, and it's far easier to launch a program internally and get 10, 15 people on it than it is to launch an open program and to get 15 people. So what I'm doing is running it in 3 or 4 different corporates, and it's called High Impact Success. And it's a bit of a hybrid model. It's based over 90 days. And we were talking earlier on, weren't we, about the whole 90-day principle. And it's very much around, the women, a lot of women, not all, still feel quite challenged corporately. It can still feel very male dominated in many of the corporates. And it's, how do I get my voice out there authentically without sort of turning into somebody else? Even just as you've just described there with me, how do I not go down the same avenue I see other people because it works for them? You have to find what's right for you. And so it's a couple of days initially together face to face, which I'm really excited about because we've come away so much from getting together in person for so long with the pandemic, etc. And there's nothing better than actually looking at somebody, between the whites of their eyes. I love it. So 2 days coming together and essentially starting the roadmap of what do I personally need, because I want to make it as bespoke as we possibly can. There's content I'm bringing, but then you take that and apply that in your own personal context. So there's some content on those first 2 days, and essentially then it's a case of developing your own roadmap. And then we go away and we have a mixture of hybrid, getting together, sort of action learning calls. What are we learning collectively? A bit of input, a bit of content on those calls, but sharing and successes, sharing stuckness as well. And as I say, some of the content which are models I want to share with them to help nudge people forward. They also have some coaching calls personally with me. And then at the end, we get back together for a final day in person again at the end of the 90 days, which is to reflect on where we've come. So I'm doing that for 3 different corporates, hoping to get a fourth, but it doesn't matter if I don't, because that will give me the data that I need, the testimonials that I need. And then I'd really like to launch it for solopreneurs. I'd really like to do that because I think that will be helpful in terms of what I see out there as what's needed. But this is my sort of testing point, first of all, just to get it off the ground.
So I'm curious, and that's why I have a podcast. A lot of people talk an awful lot about launching programs into the small business owner market, because the non-corporate market, so to speak.
Yeah.
What's different between that and the way that you've gone with launching into corporate? What does that actually look like? Is it just a few phone calls saying, I've got this thing, would you be interested? Or is there anything more to that?
Primarily, yes. If I'm being absolutely brutally honest, because of the relationship, because of my track record with them, because they know who I am and what I bring, it was a case of I pulled together a brochure, first of all, that explained it, what it looked like, etc. And it really was just this is something I want to do. Ideally, I would like 8 people, a minimum of 8, maximum of 15. Is this something that you could see as a fit? I think there is a definite fit in your organisation based on my experience. Do you think you could get together, a minimum of 8 people to do this at some point, in the first sort of 6 months of next year? A couple came back and said, we can't fit it in yet, but yeah, we're interested. But then 3 of them came back and said, that's something that will be good. And it's definitely been on our radar. So if you could take that off our plate and do that for us, then fantastic. So it was a fairly painless process, if I'm being honest, which people will either be inspired by that or infuriated.
Probably different people will approach it in one of those 2 ways. Probably both. This is something I think a lot of people, they do get down this, I can't think what to call the non-corporate space, but the non-corporate space.
Yeah.
And think that's where they need to go because that's what everybody else seems to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing with the corporate is a lot of people, the selling there is quite quiet because there's no big flamboyant launches.
That's right.
It's much more about cultivating a network, being as valuable as possible to that network, building trust, and that will be reciprocated over time.
Yeah.
Time is an important factor there. You can't just rock up and say, I'm the next big thing, hire me.
Yeah.
But you can try. You probably do all right. It probably feels like a less noisy place to sell.
Yeah. One thing I've done to fairly good success for new clients or finding new clients is to send a letter, a physical, actual letter that is 1 A4 sheet long. I mean, we're talking now, how retro is that, getting actual mail, if we can get actual mail at the moment. But yeah, actual mail. It has been a little bit like that, which is, hi, you might not know who I am, but this is who I am. This is what I'm really interested in terms of your brand. I really like that you do X. I really like that you do Y. I've noticed that you do Z. This is what I do. The reason I'm sending a letter is because I want to be different. I want to stand out from the noise, from the emails, the stuff on the internet, etc. There's lots of things that I can point you to onto the internet. Here are some links. But I'd really welcome a call if you think, once you've had a look, that I've read your business correctly and you think that I could help. Please do let me know. And I've definitely had, 3 or 4 responses from that who have become clients. And they've said it really was one of those things that cut through the noise because it was just so ridiculously unusual. It's so funny to say that a piece of mail could be so unusual, but here we are in 2022, 2023. That's where it's at, and that's been really helpful. So that might be just a tip for somebody out there who thinks, do you know what, I'm going to give that a try myself. The key is, don't just talk about yourself. It's, what have I noticed about your business? What am I seeing you doing? Because then you can show that you are genuinely interested in them, and it's not just this mail shot that you're sending out to numerous people. I think that's the key thing.
I think what's really interesting there, and it reminds me of something that I used to do, is everybody has email inbox autonomy. Everybody's empowered to click their own delete button.
Yeah.
But when I used to sell websites, I had a big agency to feed. And if I really wanted a client, and this worked particularly well in the corporate space, I would have a designer design a mock-up of the most amazing looking homepage. And then we would print it big, like it would be about 2 foot high. We'd mount it on foam board and we'd have it couriered. And what I found was, if I called them up, it's somebody's job to get rid of me. If I simply emailed, they can just click the delete key.
Yeah.
But if you post them something, it's not in anybody's job description to throw this out. Somebody has to give permission for this to be disposed of.
Yes.
And what would invariably happen is it would lie around the office for weeks until the big boss walked past and said, "What's that? That looks awesome." And I say, "Yeah, it's been lying around for a while. Some company sent it in." He said, "Well, it looks awesome. Get them in."
Yeah.
And I guess your strategy is kind of similar, that if you position it in such a way that somebody has to say no, that's a conscious decision they have to make. And that decision has to exist at a certain level.
Yes.
And at least with a letter, you're likely to reach that level, which with an email, it's somebody's job to filter things out.
Absolutely that.
So there's some wisdom in the old school.
Yes, absolutely.
So Jenny, I'm looking at the time. We've been at this for a little while and I could honestly keep going for the rest of the day. But if somebody's thinking, I want to go deeper with Jenny, I want to find out more about what's in her world, I've got corporate friends, I run a corporation, or I just want to pick Jenny's brains, how can they get closer to you? How can they find out a little bit more about what you do and where you are?
Yeah, I mean, definitely come along to the website. It's simply jennyainsworth.com. You can come and take a look there. Come along and find me on LinkedIn. And now I'm thinking I have to even look at, I'm trying to think what my LinkedIn thing is. I've got it written down here somewhere.
You're very easy to find on LinkedIn. I did it earlier. Yeah,
absolutely. So yeah, come and find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Jenny Ainsworth again on LinkedIn, because then you can sort of do the messages, etc. And listen, anybody who has listened to this, let me know where you've come from. Say that you heard me with Bob, because I always like to know that. And get ready for a terrible cliche, but any friend of Bob is a friend of mine. But I mean that because we do have, similar sort of circles, similar values. So anything I can do to help or to connect with people, please do hit me up. It would be lovely to hear from you.
Well, Jenny, I am really grateful for your time. It has been just the best fun. But that does bring us to the end of another show. Thanks to you at home for listening. And if you have enjoyed the show, then I would gently encourage you to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast. That's 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 4 or 2. Mm-hmm. If you did enjoy the show, then you will also love the Personal Brand Business Roadmap. It's 100% free as a gift from me, and it's 50 pages. 50 pages, Jenny, of everything you will ever need to start, scale, or just fix your expert business. You can click or tap the link in the show notes, or just visit amplifyme.agency/roadmap. Thanks again for your time, Jenny. It has been great fun. I've learned a lot. I hope you at home have learned a lot. But for now, thank you very much, Jenny.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And you at home, see you next week. Jenny, you have a great Christmas and New Year. You at home have hopefully had a nice Christmas and New Year. See you next time.